Claire didn't open it at first. She already knew what it was. Charleston society had been buzzing for weeks. Jasper Alden, her ex-husband, the man who'd promised her forever, was getting married. The woman Camille Monroe. The same woman Claire had once seen laughing a little too loudly at one of Jasper's business parties. A rising influencer with Southern charm, vintage sundresses, and just enough mystery to make people curious. She was 27. Claire was 39. And Jasper had always liked things that looked good in photographs. Claire finally slit the envelope open with the edge of her thumbnail, careful, precise. The invitation shimmered under the soft kitchen light. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Jasper Alden and Camille Monroe at Waverly Bluff Estate. Saturday, May 28th, reception to follow. Claire let out a dry breath, half a laugh, half a choke. Waverly Bluff Estate. Her house, the one she designed from blueprints and broken dreams. She'd walked those floors barefoot before the hardwood was sealed, traced sunlight across the walls to plan every window. That house was more than home. It was her art, her labor, her sanctuary. And now it was Jasper's wedding venue. She picked up the invitation and read it again. The arrogance, the cruelty. He hadn't just moved on, he wanted her to watch. He wanted an audience. Behind her, a kettle clicked off. Steam drifted into the air. Claire didn't move. Her fingers were cold. A voice from behind startled her gently. You gonna open the rest, or should I? Martha Barlow, Southern steel wrapped in silk, leaned against the doorway with her arms crossed. She wore a housecoat that looked tailored, and pearls that hadn't left her neck in 10 years. The kind of woman who could smile at a scandal and still make the church bulletin. Claire handed it to her silently. Martha skimmed it, lips pursed in that unreadable way she had when something stirred beneath the surface. He's really doing it there? She said, more to herself than Claire. That boy's got nerve. Claire sat down at the table and stared at nothing. He wants me to see it. That's what this is. Martha folded the invitation neatly and set it on the table like it was just another piece of mail. Then she looked at her daughter with sharp, assessing eyes. Then go, she said. Claire blinked. What, go to that wedding? Martha said, voice calm as sweet tea. Put on your best dress, show up glowing, and watch them try to pretend they built something worth showing off. Claire shook her head. Mom, I can't walk into that place and see him marry her in the house. Her voice caught. I can't. Martha walked over, set a steaming mug of chamomile in front of her, and sat down. You can, and you will, but not like this. Claire's eyes met hers. For a moment, the weight between them was silent. Then Martha leaned in. He took that house. That's true, she said softly, but he didn't build it. He didn't love it into existence. You did. He may hold the paper, Claire, but he doesn't hold the story. That's still yours. Claire let the warmth of the mug settle in her hands, but her stomach was in knots. Her head spun with memories, Jasper's charm, his endless promises, his sudden coldness the day he told her the business needed collateral and she had to just sign a few things. She didn't understand the contracts, not fully, but she trusted him. That trust cost her $10 million, her name on the deed, and the last 3 years of her life. And now he was inviting her back like some twisted joke. Claire looked up. What would I even wear? Martha smiled, slow and quiet. We'll figure that out. There was something else in her mother's expression, something Claire hadn't seen in a long time, that glint of strategy behind the softness, the quiet knowledge of a woman who'd seen things, done things. Claire had always known her mother was more than just a society widow, but there were still locked drawers in the old writing desk upstairs, and old ledgers Claire had never been allowed to read. You're up to something, Claire said cautiously. Martha shrugged. I'm always up to something. You just don't always notice. Claire raised an eyebrow. You're not mad. Oh, I'm mad, Martha said. But I'm not surprised, and I'm not helpless. She leaned back in her chair. That man thinks because he got your name off a title he erased you. But he forgot one thing. What I raised you. The room went quiet again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was charged. Claire glanced down at the invitation one last time. The fonts were perfect. The paper was expensive. The kind of thing you held with fingertips, not fists. I'm not going just to watch, she said finally. If I go, I'm not going to be the woman they whisper about behind napkins. Martha's smile deepened. No, you won't. You're going to be unforgettable. Claire looked out the window. The early spring garden was blooming. Dogwoods in full white azaleas flashing pink at the edges. Waverly Bluff would be in bloom, too. She could already imagine Camille walking down the stone path she herself had laid, pretending she belonged there. No, that house wasn't theirs. Not really. Not the way it mattered. Claire took a breath. It was time to remember who she was before Jasper convinced her she needed him to feel whole. I'll go, she said, but I won't go alone. Martha nodded once. Good. Claire sipped her tea slowly, letting the heat settle into her chest. Somewhere in that house, Camille was probably choosing linens. Jasper was probably finalizing the guest list. Everything would look perfect. And Claire. She was going to make sure they never forgot who made it perfect to begin with. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know, if not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. 2 days after the red envelope, Claire found herself standing in front of a wrought iron gate that hadn't been opened in years. Vines curled lazily over the archway, half hiding the brass plaque that read, Barlow House, 1908. She reached up, brushed her fingers across the lettering, and let her breath settle. It had been a long time since she'd come here alone. Behind her, the gravel drive crunched with Martha's slow steps. I told the groundskeeper to leave it wild, her mother said. Sometimes things grow better when you stop trying to control them. Claire offered a small smile, but didn't look back. Her heart was tight in her chest, the kind of tight that doesn't come from fear, but from the memory of everything you've lost and everything you're not sure you deserve to reclaim. She pushed the gate open, the hinges groaning just enough to remind her how long it had been. The old family estate rose in front of them, whitewashed wood-green shutters wrap around porch. The magnolia tree in the yard stretched its limbs like it still owned the place. It did. In a way, it always had. Martha moved ahead, key in hand. Come on, she said. There's something I want you to see. The inside smelled like lavender and lemon oil, faint and familiar. Dust sheets covered the furniture, but everything was exactly where it had always been. The grandfather clock in the hall. The oil painting of Claire's great-grandmother above the mantel. The long mirror that had once caught Claire in her first high heels, too big and full of dreams. They stopped at the bottom of the staircase. Upstairs, Martha said. End of the hall, left side. Claire followed her fingers, brushing the banister. She could still hear the echo of her childhood footsteps racing these steps, her laugh bouncing off the walls. At the end of the hall was a study, Martha's old sanctuary. Claire hadn't been allowed in there often. Mama's working, they used to say. Grown-up business. Now the door creaked open like it had been waiting for her. The room was dim, the curtains drawn. A single beam of sunlight cut across the oak desk. Martha stepped in behind her and walked to the bookshelf, pulling out an old ledger, leather-bound and cracked. She set it down in front of Claire. Go ahead. Claire opened it slowly. Inside were names, dates, property records, investment notes, legal references. "What is this?" "My other life," Martha said, settling into the armchair beside the desk. "Before I put on the pearls and baked casseroles for the church socials." Claire flipped the pages. Hotel properties, commercial holdings, even a small vineyard in North Carolina. Her mouth parted slightly as she read down one column, Waverly Bluff Estate. "Wait. This is my old house." Martha nodded once. "I purchased it under a holding company. Quietly. Years before you and Jasper even met. When you married, I added your name to the trust." Claire looked up, breath shallow. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to build your life without thinking there was a net under you. I wanted you to feel strong on your own, not shielded by me." Martha paused, then added, "But I also made sure that if anyone tried to take what you built, I'd be there to catch it." Claire closed the book carefully. "So, when I signed it over to Jasper, it didn't actually—" "You transferred rights," Martha said, "but not ownership. Not completely. The trust has clauses, conditions, legal ones." Claire blinked, like what Martha smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Like the property cannot be transferred or resold without my consent. And if the marriage tied to the transfer ends, ownership reverts." Claire's mouth fell open. "So it's still mine?" "It's still ours," Martha corrected gently. "But yes. As of your divorce finalization, that house, your house, is legally back in Barlow hands." Claire leaned back, stunned. The air in the room shifted. It wasn't just about property. It was about history, about control, about the pieces of herself she thought she'd lost when she left that house behind. She looked down at her hands, whispering, "He thought he won." Martha stood. "He thought wrong." For a long moment, silence hovered between them. Then Claire lifted her eyes. "I don't want revenge," she said, voice steady. "I want clarity. I want to walk into that place with my head up, not to ruin his day, just to remember mine isn't over." Martha's eyes gleamed. "Then let's make sure you have everything you need to do just that." Later that afternoon, back at her apartment above Judith's Bakery, Claire sat at her drafting table with a blank sketch pad. She hadn't designed anything in months, not since the divorce. Her hands hovered uncertain. But something stirred. A shape, a curve, a porch arch. She began to draw, and lines bloomed beneath her pencil. Not a house this time. A space, a gathering place. Warm, open, alive. A knock at the door pulled her back. Judith stepped in without waiting, wiping flour off her hands. "I made cornbread," she said, holding up a tin foil pan. "But also, Charlotte Avery called me." Claire turned slowly. "The Society columnist." "She asked if I knew anything about the Alden wedding menu," Judith said. "Apparently Camille's going for French fusion, caviar and quenelles and truffle foam." Claire raised an eyebrow. "At Waverly Bluff. That's not just tone-deaf. That's sacrilege." Judith grinned. "You said you didn't want revenge, but you never said you didn't want to reclaim the mood." Claire laughed, the first real one in a long while. She took the cornbread, the smell pulling her back to childhood dinners and summer evenings. Judith settled into the armchair by the window. "You know, she said you could cater the reception." Claire nearly choked. "Are you serious? I know the chef they're using." "She owes me a favor. You'd be surprised what slips onto a menu if you know where to nudge." Claire stared at her. "You walk into that wedding as a guest," Judith said. "But your heart walks in as the architect. And maybe the flavor of the day reminds everyone whose story they're standing in." Claire didn't answer right away. But inside something shifted. She wasn't chasing justice. She wasn't even chasing Jasper. She was walking herself home. And this time she would leave the door open for no one but herself. Claire hadn't expected to see him again so soon. It was just past noon when she stepped into the courtyard behind Southern Lux Realty Jasper's company. Ava had asked to meet her for lunch, something about an update on the property paperwork. But now Claire wondered if this was less about lunch and more about strategy. Ava, ever the tactician, always had layers under her layers. The cafe was nestled beside a row of flowering crepe myrtles, the kind of place where deals were made quietly over pecan salads and iced tea. Claire adjusted her sunglasses, tugged her linen blazer close, and scanned the tables. Ava hadn't arrived yet, but Jasper had. He was seated just 2 tables over, back straight sleeves rolled smiling wide, his signature performance look, and across from him, Camille. Tall, blonde, delicate features softened by designer sunglasses and a sleeveless silk dress in a color too pale to be practical. She laughed at something Jasper said, her head tilted in that way Claire knew too well. A lean-in laugh. Performed intimacy. Claire froze. She hadn't prepared for this, not here, not yet. Her instinct was to walk away, to vanish back into the comfort of anonymity. But something in her held still. Jasper looked different. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe she had simply grown new eyes. He moved with the same confidence, the same over-polished charm. But now it looked thinner. Flatter. There was a hollowness to it she hadn't noticed before. Camille reached across the table, rested her hand lightly on his. Claire felt a sharp tug in her chest. It wasn't jealousy. It was recognition. Of her own past. Of how easily she'd once believed that same look, that same voice, that same promise. Ava arrived behind her, crisp and composed as always. She took one look at Claire's face, followed her line of sight, and sighed. Well, she said. We walked straight into Act 1. Claire turned slowly, forcing her breath even. Why, here it's where his people go, Ava said. He wants to be seen. He wants people talking. She glanced again at Camille. That girl's pretty, and she knows it, but she doesn't know what she's stepped into. Claire pulled her gaze away. I don't want to do this today. Ava nodded toward the shaded corner. Then let's sit with our backs to the stage. They slid into their seats, ordered peach tea and garden salads, and tried to steer the conversation back to business. But the presence behind them throbbed like a memory pressed too hard. I looked through the deed language again, Ava said after a sip of tea. Martha's trust conditions are airtight. The moment your divorce was finalized, legal control reverted. So he has no idea. None, unless someone tipped him off, which I doubt. He always underestimated Martha. Claire picked at her salad, her appetite dimmed. I don't want to blindside him. Ava's brow lifted. You don't? Claire hesitated. I want the truth out. But not like a scandal, not like revenge. Ava tilted her head. Then maybe we don't serve it like revenge. Maybe we serve it like a reminder. Claire glanced down at her napkin, then up again. Her voice dropped low. Did he ever love me? The question surprised them both. Ava leaned in. Yes. Probably. In the way people like Jasper know how to love. But you loved deeper. And longer. And when the scale tipped, he couldn't carry it. Claire nodded slowly. The ache in her chest wasn't grief anymore. It was the shadow of something already healed over just tender when touched. They finished their lunch quietly, the kind of quiet that settles in old friendships, no need to fill every pause. Claire stood to leave first. She didn't look back at Jasper's table. But Camille did. As Claire passed, Camille caught her gaze and held it. Not long. Just enough. Her smile flickered warm, curious, a little unsure. And in that moment, Claire saw it. She doesn't know. She doesn't know the cost of what she's standing on, the truth of the walls she's decorating, the ghost that still walks that house in Claire's name. Claire didn't break stride, but that look haunted her all the way home. That evening she found herself back at her drafting table staring at the sketch she'd started the night before. The design was growing a garden terrace, now a gallery space for local artists, even a community kitchen. She didn't want to recreate the past. She wanted to reclaim it, turn it into something alive. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Judith stepped in, holding 2 glasses of sweet tea and a small box. "Thought you could use a break." Claire smiled gratefully. "What's in the box?" Judith set it down, flipped it open. Inside were sample swatches, linens, colors, patterns. "You're going to need something for the wedding." Claire lifted a swatch of red silk. It shimmered like firelight. Judith nodded toward it. "That one feels like you." Claire set it down. "You think Camille knows what she's walking into?" Judith's expression softened. "I think she thinks she's walking into a fairy tale, but life doesn't hand out castles without ghosts." Claire exhaled slowly. "I saw them today. At the cafe." Judith sat beside her. "How'd it feel like watching someone else wear my skin?" They sat for a while, watching the light fade through the window. Finally, Judith stood. "When you go to that wedding," she said, "you're not going to confront anyone. You're not going to reclaim a man or a title or even a house." She leaned down, looked Claire in the eye. "You're going to remind the world that you were always the story. He was just a chapter." When the door closed behind her, Claire looked again at the red silk. She ran her fingers over it, the fabric warm from the setting sun. Then she picked up her pencil and kept building. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way. The knock at the door came just after 9. Claire had been sorting through old design folders on her laptop, half distracted by the sound of summer rain tapping against the window. She wasn't expecting anyone. Judith had gone home hours ago. Ava was in court all day. Martha never knocked. She just appeared, usually holding a cup of something steeped and meaningful. Claire hesitated, then stood. When she opened the door, a man stood under the porch light water collecting in the collar of his coat. Tall, clean-cut, early 40s. Familiar in a way she couldn't place right away until he spoke. "Claire Barlow," he said, offering a polite smile. "It's been a while." She narrowed her eyes, puzzled. "I'm sorry. Have we met Logan Merritt?" he said. "Used to work in development at Southern Lux, back when you and Jasper were—" He stopped, corrected himself. Back when the Waverly Project was still breaking ground. She blinked. The name clicked. Logan. He was one of the architects who'd helped her lay out the garden atrium. Soft-spoken, sharp-eyed. They'd exchanged maybe a dozen conversations over a few weeks, mostly about lighting angles and load-bearing columns. And now he was here. "I didn't know you were still in Charleston," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "I left for a while," he said. "New Orleans, then Savannah. Came back last year to take care of my mother. Thought about reaching out, but—" He looked around the apartment, modest, curated, full of warmth and intentional mess. "Didn't know if I'd be welcome." Claire studied him for a moment. He looked good. Not slick like Jasper, not polished to perfection. Just real. Lived in. His hair was tousled from the rain. His eyes the same cool gray she remembered, with a quiet sadness behind them now. "You want tea?" she asked finally. He smiled. "I'd love it." In the kitchen, Claire filled the kettle while Logan leaned against the counter. "I ran into Ava this morning," he said. "She mentioned you're consulting on something new. A retreat space." Claire nodded. It's early, mostly just sketches. She said you're reclaiming Waverly Bluff. Claire paused her hand, hovering over the tea tin. She talked too much, she muttered. Logan raised his hands. I didn't ask, she offered. Said I might be able to help. Claire turned eyebrow raised. Help how? I know the structure. I know what was compromised during the last remodel, and I know Jasper's taste for shortcuts. Claire exhaled, crossing her arms. You still work for him, No, Logan said quickly. I left just before the Camille chapter started. He changed. Claire nodded slowly. Yes, he did. The kettle whistled. She poured the water, set the mugs between them. Silence stretched for a beat. I always admired that house, Logan said. But it was never about the walls. It was the way you designed space, the way people felt in it. Claire looked down at her tea. I lost that for a while, she said. I let someone tell me my work was just decoration. Logan's gaze didn't waver. It was never just decoration. You built belonging. The words landed heavy in her chest. Claire cleared her throat. So why now, why come find me? He didn't answer right away. He looked out the rain-smeared window like he was weighing something. Because I saw the invitation, he said finally. And I thought, if anyone deserves to be seen, truly seen, it's you. Not as someone's ex. Not as a footnote. As the person who made all of this possible. Claire stared at him, the steam from her tea curling between them. And what do you want? Logan, his voice dropped just slightly. A chance to work with you. To help restore what matters. To do something that means something again. A long pause passed. Claire's heart beat a little faster than it should have. I'm not the same person I was back then, she said. Good, he said softly. Neither am I. She didn't smile. But she didn't look away. That night after Logan left, Claire stood alone in her kitchen, the second mug of tea untouched. She ran a hand through her hair and exhaled slowly. There had been a moment, just a flicker, when she'd let herself wonder what it might feel like to let someone new in. But that wasn't the story she was writing right now. Right now, she had work to do. The next morning, she stood with Martha on the front lawn of Waverly Bluff. The gates had been unlocked, the keys delivered by Ava, along with a sealed envelope confirming the trust reversion. The house at last was officially back in the Barlow name. It was early. Mist clung to the ground like memory. The house stood tall, elegant, untouchable. Claire looked up at it like it might exhale. She stepped forward slowly, hand brushing the white column by the door. Her finger stopped just beneath a small etching barely visible. A C carved in cursive. Claire. She'd scratched it there during construction on a day when the paint hadn't yet dried, and her hope was still untamed. She looked at Martha. I'm going to make this place breathe again, Claire said quietly. Not for him, not for the headlines, for every woman who was told to smile and let it go. Martha gave a slow nod. Then let's start with the room where he's planning to say, I do. Claire stepped over the threshold, and just like that, the house began to remember her. Claire walked through Waverly Bluff like she was tracing the outline of an old scar, familiar, tender, and lined with memory. The house had changed in subtle ways. The paint on the trim was colder than she'd chosen. The banisters had been sanded down and restained a darker hue. Camille's touch was already seeping in vases of artificial orchids, soft jazz, playing from a wireless speaker tucked near the sunroom, and linen napkins monogrammed with initials that weren't hers. She passed the grand staircase and ran her hand along the railing where Jasper once told her, "This place will make headlines." Back then, she'd thought he meant for the architecture. Now she knew better. From the parlor came the muffled sound of voices, Camille's bright and syrupy, and Jasper's lower and tight. Claire slowed just enough to listen. It's not that I don't like the tiles Camille was saying, they're just dated. This whole fireplace feels like it belongs in a colonial history tour. It's original, Jasper said. You told me you loved the charm. I love charm, she replied, but there's a difference between charm and someone else's fingerprints. Claire felt the words hit like tiny needles. She moved on. In the dining hall, sunlight poured through the wide French doors, the ones she fought for during the build. Jasper wanted narrow, traditional windows. Claire insisted on openness on light. Logan was there, crouched beside a support beam near the far wall, sketching something on a clipboard. He glanced up when she entered. I was hoping you'd come by. Claire crossed the room slowly, her heels echoing on the hardwood. I saw the new color palettes Camille's designer submitted, she said, voice steady. She's planning to paint over the mural in the vestibule. Logan's brow tightened. That mural was hand-painted by a local artist. It's historically protected. Claire nodded. She wants to replace it with neutral elegance. Logan stood. You're not going to let that happen, are you? She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the French doors and looked out at the garden, overgrown now, but the bones were still there. The stone path, the koi pond, the iron bench she once read on for hours. Ghosts of peace. Do you ever think people fall in love with the idea of something she said quietly, but not the work it takes to hold it? Logan stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. Every day, he said. She turned their eyes, meeting. And what if you were the one who built it? What if they fell in love with your creation, and then tried to erase you from it? His voice softened. Then you make sure they remember. Not with noise, with truth. Claire studied him, his calm, his steadiness, the way he never flinched at her sharp edges. She had grown so used to shrinking herself in love. Logan didn't ask her to. She exhaled, barely a whisper. The wedding is in 3 weeks. I know. They'll expect everything to be perfect. They don't know the house is no longer theirs to expect anything from. Claire nodded. I want to keep that quiet. Logan tilted his head. Even from Camille. Especially from Camille. She's not the enemy. She's just caught in the performance. Logan gave a small smile. So what's your move? Claire looked down at the floor, then back up at him. I want the house restored, to what it was meant to be, not what they tried to make it. I want her to stand there in her dress, look around, and feel that something's off. That this place isn't echoing her dream, that it belongs to someone else. Logan's eyes sharpened with understanding. You want her to feel your presence. I want her to feel the truth, Claire said. And I want him to feel what it's like to be a guest in a house he thought he owned. Logan stepped back to his clipboard, flipping through his notes. Then we start with the bones. Quiet fixes. The kind no one notices, until they're standing in the middle of it, wondering why it doesn't feel like theirs. She watched him for a moment longer, then turned toward the exit. Claire, he called gently. She paused. You're not alone in this. Something in her chest shifted. Not a leap, not a jolt, just a settling, like breath after holding too much in. I know, she said. Outside, the sky was a patchwork of blue and cloud. Claire walked along the side of the estate, heels crunching the gravel path towards the old conservatory. It had been sealed for years, too hot in summer, too drafty in winter, but she remembered it as the place Jasper first kissed her. Not their first kiss, but the first kiss where he wasn't performing, where it felt like something real had cracked through the gloss. She reached the door and found it unlocked. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of dried herbs. The stained glass panels filtered light in amber green and rose, and sitting there on the long stone bench beside the broken potting table was Camille. Claire froze. Camille looked up, startled. "Oh, I didn't think anyone knew this was open." Claire stepped in slowly. "It's usually locked." "I've been sneaking away in the afternoons," Camille said. "Too many people inside asking too many questions." Claire moved to the opposite end of the bench. "I always liked this room," she said. "Felt like it belonged to itself." Camille smiled faintly. "That's a good way to put it." Silence settled. Then Camille said softly, "He doesn't talk about you." Claire turned slightly. "Jasper?" Camille clarified. "It's like you're a chapter he skipped over. I only found out about the house when we were deep into planning. Then Judith mentioned it, and I started wondering what kind of woman he married first." Claire stayed quiet. Camille studied her hands. "You're not what I expected." "And what did you expect I don't know?" Camille admitted. "Someone bitter, dismissive, sharp." Claire gave a small smile. "Well, I can be all of those." Camille's voice dropped. "Do you still love him?" Claire met her eyes. "No, but I remember what it felt like to love who I thought he was." Camille's gaze faltered. And in that moment, Claire saw the cracks beneath the surface, the pressure, the uncertainty, the same ones she had once tried to plaster over with perfect table settings and polite silences. Camille stood abruptly. "I should go. They'll be looking for me." Claire nodded. At the door, Camille paused. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're a ghost. I think you're still very much in the walls." When she left, the conservatory felt suddenly larger. Claire sat back, letting the colors from the stained glass paint her arms in red and gold. The house was remembering her. And so was Camille. 3 days later, Claire stood beneath the arch of the east veranda, watching morning light spill across the lawn like honey. The grounds had begun to shift slowly, subtly. She and Logan had worked in near silence over the last few days, clearing dead shrubs, restoring the original fountain, and rerouting footpaths that had been stamped over by planners with no sense of soul. The estate was remembering itself. And so was she. She heard the door open behind her. "You're early," Logan said, his voice smooth but carrying a hint of sleep. "Either that or I'm late." Claire turned. He was holding 2 coffees and wearing the same faded blue button-down he wore the day they replanned the terrace, now rolled up at the sleeves, his collar still damp from a rushed shower. "I couldn't sleep," she said, taking one of the cups. "My brain wouldn't shut off. Every time I tried, I'd see that mural in the vestibule being primed over." He winced. "Please tell me you stopped it." "Just in time." Ava sent a cease order under the trust clause. Claire took a sip, letting the warmth settle her. "I still can't believe he didn't know." Logan stepped beside her, leaning on the rail. Jasper never asked the right questions. He was too used to assuming. Claire glanced sideways. "You really think that's all it was?" Assumption Logan hesitated. "I think he believed the story he told himself. That he was the visionary. That everything around him, people, places, was decoration for his rise." She looked down at her coffee. "And I let him decorate me." "No," Logan said gently. "You gave him space in a world you built. He just never deserved the key." Claire looked up. Their eyes met, and for a moment the porch felt still, like the world had paused to give her space to breathe. Logan held her gaze, patient, grounded. And Claire, who had forgotten what it felt like to be seen without expectation, let herself look back. The moment broke when a voice called from the garden. "Claire." She turned. Martha stood near the fountain holding a folder thick with documents, and marked up plans. "We need to talk," her mother said, her tone tight. Claire and Logan exchanged a look. Then she set her coffee down and walked toward the steps. Martha didn't wait. She turned and led Claire into the house through the corridor and into the old library where morning light striped the floor in golden bands. She closed the door behind them. "What is it?" Claire asked. Martha dropped the folder on the table. "He's onto something." Claire's breath caught. "Jasper, I overheard a conversation yesterday. He was on the phone with his lawyer asking about beneficiary redirection and something about contested deed rights." Claire moved to the table and opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of trust clauses, receipts from restoration vendors, Camille's wedding planning memos, even a catering change. "He's trying to shift ownership again," Martha said, arms crossed. "Trying to dig under the foundation." Claire shook her head. "He can't. The language is airtight. Legally, yes. But socially, he's moving faster. Camille's already arranged a media walkthrough for next week. Interior stylists, photographers. There's even a Vogue Weddings feature lined up." Claire sank into the chair. Martha continued, her voice softer now. "I know you want to be graceful, but you need to remember something. That house carries your name. Not just legally, spiritually. And if you wait too long to reclaim it publicly, someone else is going to write the ending." Claire looked up slowly. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you should be the one to invite them. The press, the stylists. Let them see the house through your eyes, the real version, before Camille wraps it in lace and fantasy." Claire leaned back, thoughts racing. "I'd need help," she said finally. "You have it." That night, Claire sat on the porch of Judith's apartment, her laptop glowing in the dark. She'd crafted an email, short, confident, precise. Subject: an invitation to see the house before the vows. "Dear Ms. Ellison, I believe you're planning a feature on the upcoming Alden wedding at Waverly Bluff. Before that happens, I thought you might like a closer look at the house's origin. The bones, the design, the intention. Waverly Bluff has a story that deserves to be heard. I'll be at the estate this Saturday morning if you'd like to come by. Warmly, Claire Barlow." She hovered over the send button. Her finger paused. Her breath caught. Then click. 3 seconds later, the message was gone. The next morning, the reply came. "Claire, we've been hearing quiet murmurs about your role in the estate. I'd love to speak with you. See you Saturday. Harper Ellison, Southern Living." Claire exhaled, chest tightening with nerves and something else. Purpose. She turned toward the garden where Logan was already working beneath the oak trees, relining the flower beds she once filled with wild tulips. He glanced up, caught her watching, and offered a small, tired smile. She raised her coffee in salute. The wind shifted through the trees. And somewhere deep in the bones of Waverly Bluff, the house began to stir. The sun hadn't fully climbed over the magnolias when Claire stepped out of her car in front of Waverly Bluff. The air was warm, already heavy with that deep Carolina humidity, and the kind of stillness that only happened just before something began. She smoothed the front of her dress, a soft, structured cream with hand-stitched embroidery along the hem, and checked her reflection in the driver's side mirror. She looked composed, polished, but her fingers trembled slightly against her clutch. Today wasn't about confrontation. It was about reclaiming a space with grace, telling the real story in her own voice before someone else twisted it. She walked toward the front door just as Logan pulled up in his truck, stepping out in a charcoal button-down and dark slacks sleeves rolled clipboard under his arm. "You ready?" he asked. Claire gave a small, controlled breath. Almost. Inside, Judith and Ava were already working. Judith adjusted flower arrangements. Nothing too grand, just fresh lavender and hydrangeas in reclaimed glass vases, while Ava double-checked the documents laid out in the study. "The writer will be here in 20, Judith said without looking up. And the photographer asked about lighting in the conservatory. I told her 10:15 would give the best glass refraction." Claire nodded, pacing slowly through the foyer, letting the rhythm of preparation settle her nerves. Every detail was intentional. She wanted the space to breathe no overly polished corners, no rented props, just the bones, the light, and the history. Her history. At 10:06, the doorbell rang. Claire smoothed her dress again, then opened the door to a tall woman in her late 40s with sleek graying hair, a tailored navy jumpsuit, and eyes that said she'd seen more than she ever printed. "Ms. Barlow," the woman asked, offering her hand. "Harper Ellison," Southern Living Claire replied, shaking it firmly. "Come in." Harper's photographer. A younger man with a gentle demeanor, and camera already clicking, followed closely behind. The tour began in the vestibule. Claire stood beneath the restored mural florals winding into a southern sunrise and told Harper about the artist, the layers of paint that had almost hidden it, and how the design was based on a wild marigold her mother planted by accident one spring. "I don't think it was an accident," Harper said, studying the colors. Claire gave a soft laugh. "With Martha Barlow." "Probably not." They moved through the library, the solarium, the grand hall, each space layered with texture, warmth, and echoes of its original design. Harper took notes, asked quiet questions, occasionally paused to absorb rather than respond. It wasn't until they reached the conservatory that something shifted. Harper stepped inside camera shutters, snapping behind her, and turned in a slow circle beneath the stained glass dome. "This is where I've seen Camille post," she said. "She uses this space a lot." Claire nodded. "It's one of the only rooms she didn't try to change." Harper raised an eyebrow. "You say that like it's personal." Claire didn't flinch. "Because it is." She walked to the bench by the window, fingers grazing the edge. "Camille thinks this is where she found beauty, but this is where I found silence." After the first time Jasper canceled dinner to stay late at the office, after he forgot my mother's birthday, after he told me the house wasn't really mine, just a title I was borrowing. This room reminded me that beauty didn't need permission. Harper's pen slowed. "So why invite me here?" Because what he tried to erase, Claire said, voice steady, was never gone. The walls remembered. "And now, I think it's time everyone else did too." The words hung in the air like the dust motes catching sunlight. Logan stepped into the doorway, catching Claire's eye with a silent nod. "Time." Harper followed Claire down the hall into the study, where Ava stood beside a leather-bound folio. "These are the original deeds," Ava said, sliding them forward. "And the trust documents, legally transferred under the Waverly Clause." Harper's eyes narrowed as she scanned the details. "This house belongs to you?" she asked slowly. Claire looked her in the eye. It always did. Harper leaned back, tapping her pen against the folder. "So why the quiet play? Why not announce it loud and messy?" Claire glanced toward the window, the sunlight playing through the Spanish moss like threads of gold. "Because this isn't a revenge story," she said. "It's a reminder of who built this, of what love and legacy look like when they aren't stage-managed. Let Camille have her wedding. Let Jasper smile for the cameras. But let the house speak louder." The interview wrapped just before noon. As Harper and her photographer left, she turned to Claire at the door. "This'll make waves," she said. "Are you ready for that?" Claire smiled softly. "I'm not here to cause waves. I'm here to walk on them." After the car pulled away, Claire stepped back inside and closed the door behind her. Judith appeared with 2 glasses of lemonade, handing one off with a small, satisfied smile. You were perfect. Claire sat on the edge of the staircase. I wasn't trying to be. That's exactly why you were Judith replied. Logan came down the hallway, sleeves now fully rolled, clipboard under his arm. She's going to write the truth, he said. I could feel it. Claire looked up at him, searching his face for any flicker of doubt. You think this will change anything? She asked. I think, Logan said slowly, this is the first time people will hear your side before they see his. Claire leaned her head back against the banister, the quiet of the house folding around her like an old shawl. Outside, the cicadas had begun to hum. And somewhere in Charleston, a wedding invitation was being printed wrapped in ivory linen paper gold script, dancing over names that weren't hers. But that no longer mattered. Because inside Waverly Bluff, her name was etched in the wood, sewn into the curtains, and whispered through the walls. And soon the world would hear it, too. It started with a whisper. 2 days after the Southern Living team left Waverly Bluff, the online edition posted a feature titled The Woman Behind the House, Claire Barlow's Quiet Legacy. It wasn't front page, not yet, but the right people saw it. Designers reposted it, journalists flagged it, and within 24 hours Claire's inbox filled with emails, some curious, some congratulatory, some quietly stunned. By the time Camille's wedding stylist team arrived for their second walkthrough, the energy on the property had shifted. Claire stood near the garden steps, arms folded as a woman with platinum hair and a thick New York accent waved fabric swatches at Judith. I just don't understand why the neutral palette isn't being honored, the stylist snapped. Camille was very clear. Minimal elegance. Judith, ever unbothered, tilted her head. We're honoring the house. That's the palette. The stylist huffed. This is starting to feel complicated. Judith smiled politely. That's because it is. Inside, Logan was resanding the dining room floor, a job no one had asked him to do, but one that had bugged Claire since the day she saw the uneven boards. The light through the tall windows caught the dust in golden flakes. It looked like the room was suspended in time. Claire leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You really think it matters? She asked. The floor, Logan didn't pause. Everything matters. She stepped closer, careful not to get in the way. They think I'm doing this to ruin the wedding. He stopped, glanced up, saw the weight behind her eyes. You're not, he said. You're doing this so the house tells the truth before anyone else does. Claire let out a slow breath. Sometimes I wish I didn't care so much. Logan stood. People who don't care don't build legacies. They build exits. She looked at him, then really looked. The quiet assurance. The way he never tried to outshine the moment. He wasn't asking to be part of the spotlight, he just made sure the light reached the right places. I read the article again last night, Claire said. There was this one line. She hesitated, then recited softly. She never raised her voice, but the house still listened. Logan's gaze softened. It did, he said. Later that afternoon, Claire returned to the conservatory. She didn't expect anyone to be there, but Camille sat near the back window, scrolling on her phone, her posture too still to be casual. Claire walked in without announcing herself. Camille looked up. Her eyes were guarded. Tired. I saw the article, she said. Claire didn't sit. She kept her distance, but not coldly. Did it surprise you? Camille looked back at the glass. No, I think I always knew there was more to this place than I was being told. Claire folded her arms. And yet you're marrying the man who tried to erase it. There was no venom in her voice, just fact. Camille's jaw clenched. You think I don't see it now? Claire didn't answer. Camille rose slowly. You were right. About the house, about him. And you're probably right that I've been... Complicit. But this wedding is set. There are people flying in, vendors locked, money spent. Money can be refunded, reputations can't. Claire walked toward the center of the room, her heels echoing softly against the stone. Do you love him, Camille? The question landed like a pin dropped in water. Camille looked away. I wanted to. Claire's voice was quiet. You still can leave. There's no shame in that. Camille turned to face her fully. Would you have Claire thought for a long beat? Not back then. I needed to believe it meant something. I needed to be right. Camille's eyes welled, but no tears fell. She nodded once, then left the room, her heels clicking faster with each step. Claire stood alone in the conservatory, heart heavy with an ache she didn't expect. Not for Jasper. Not even for Camille. For the version of herself who once sat in that same corner clinging to silence, waiting for love to come back in the door. The next morning, Ava called. You need to see this, she said, barely pausing. The ledger ran a follow-up. Full front page. Claire blinked. What they used the Southern Living piece as a source, then dug through public filings. Jasper's planning company is under investigation for misreporting ownership structures. One of the board members just resigned. Claire sat down slowly, phone pressed to her ear. He can't pin this on you, Ava continued. Every transfer has your signature clear and separate. You're clean. But his team is panicking. Camille's name was tied to the design contracts. Claire closed her eyes, heart pounding. And there's more, Ava said. He's trying to move the wedding. We're another estate north of Charleston. But they don't have availability. If this falls through, there's talk of postponement. Claire whispered. He won't let that happen. No, Ava said. But you don't need to do anything. Let him scramble. Let him reveal himself. Claire stood and looked out the window. The light was different that day, clearer, less filtered. She hung up, then turned toward the house. It was almost time, not for confrontation, not even for justice, but for the truth to take its seat at the front of the room. A soft breeze pushed through the curtains in the drawing room, carrying with it the scent of jasmine and the ocean air rolling in from Charleston Harbor. Claire stood by the window, her hands clasped tightly behind her back, watching as Logan laid out fresh linens over the long mahogany table. The room had never looked better, each element placed with care, each surface polished, each vase filled with blooms that felt wild but deliberate, like the kind of beauty that couldn't be bought. I called it, Judith said as she walked in, holding two mismatched teacups. You lit the first match. Now Jasper's whole world's starting to smoke. Claire turned to her, managing a tired smile. I didn't think it would unravel this fast. That's the thing about paper palaces, Judith said, handing her a cup. They look sturdy until it rains. Claire took a sip and leaned against the edge of the windowsill. Her thoughts weren't on the fallout or even on the headlines. They were on Camille. Since their conversation in the conservatory, she hadn't seen her. Not at the house, not in passing. Judith said Camille canceled her final walk-through. Martha, ever perceptive, said she'd probably gone into hiding. Embarrassment had a way of closing doors. Logan stepped into the room, glancing between the two women. You heard the latest. Claire looked up. No. Ledger's reporting Jasper tried to secure a venue out in Blakely Ridge. His deposit was declined. Too high a risk. Word's out now, vendors are backing away. Judith let out a low whistle. And the wedding's in, 10 days? 7, Claire said, voice barely above a whisper. Logan came closer, voice softer. This is where he scrambles, where he gets sloppy. Claire nodded slowly. And this is where we stay steady. Outside, the sound of gravel crunching beneath tires pulled Claire from her thoughts. She moved toward the front of the house, the others trailing behind her, and opened the heavy door just as Camille stepped out of a cab. She looked pale. Her shoulders pulled tight beneath a linen shawl, and she held a small leather bag like it contained the weight of her entire life. "Claire," she said, her voice tight. "Come in." They moved to the side sitting room, the one with the deep green walls and bay windows, where the light was soft and the air was still. Camille sat first, then hesitated as if unsure what she was allowed to say. Claire waited. Finally, Camille spoke. "He lied to me. About the house, about the money, about you." Claire tilted her head slightly. "What did he say?" "That you walked away," Camille said, voice brittle. "That you never really wanted this life. That he tried to give you everything, but you were ungrateful." Claire let out a quiet breath, neither surprised nor moved. "Sounds rehearsed." Camille nodded. "He's been rehearsing it for years." Silence filled the room. Then Camille reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet box. "I found this in his drawer last week," she said, setting it on the table between them. Claire hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a pair of pearl earrings. Her pearl earrings. She remembered them immediately. A gift from her mother on her wedding day. She'd searched for them months after the divorce, convinced she'd misplaced them. "He told me they were his mother's." Camille said, voice cracking slightly. "He planned to give them to me on our wedding morning." Claire closed the box gently. Camille looked up, eyes glassy. "I don't think I'm marrying him." Claire studied her face. The fear, the humiliation, the exhaustion, and under it all, relief. "You don't have to decide today," Claire said gently. "But if you do walk away, walk because it's what you want. Not because you're afraid of staying." Camille looked down, nodding slowly. "I don't know who I am anymore." Claire leaned forward, her voice soft and firm. "Then take the time to find out. Without someone else writing the script." The room fell quiet again. Camille stood smoothing the front of her blouse. "I'm going to the coast. My aunt has a place in Sullivan's Island. No service, no noise, just space." Claire nodded. "Good." At the door, Camille paused. "I know I don't deserve your kindness." Claire looked her in the eye. "Maybe not. But I remember what it's like to wake up and realize you're sleeping in someone else's dream." Camille didn't respond. She simply gave a grateful nod, turned, and walked down the front steps without looking back. As the cab pulled away, Logan stepped beside Claire, quiet for a moment. "Was that closure?" he asked. Claire shook her head. "No. That was grace." She stepped back inside and closed the door. Later that evening, Logan found her in the library, sitting by the fireplace, with an old journal spread across her lap. Her hair was loose, her posture softer than usual, her guard set aside for the first time in what felt like weeks. He sat across from her without speaking. "I forgot how much I used to write in here," she said, running her fingers across the faded ink. "Not just dreams. Plans, real ones." "You should write again," Logan said. Claire smiled faintly. "Maybe I will." He leaned forward slightly. "You've done more than reclaim a house, Claire. You reclaimed the story." She looked up. "The ending's not written yet." "No," Logan said. "But I hope I'm in the next chapter." There was no grand gesture, no sweeping kiss. Just two people in the quiet glow of a house that had seen both ruin and restoration. And somewhere outside, the wind turned cool, as if the season had finally begun to shift. A pale dawn crept across the windows of Waverly Bluff, painting the parlor walls in muted gold. Claire sat alone at the piano, her fingers resting silently on ivory keys, not playing, just listening. The house had gone still again, the kind of still that only came after a storm had passed, but before the news fully reached the world beyond. Camille had left. Quietly. No social announcement, no statement. Just disappeared to the edge of the sea like a woman finally stepping out of someone else's shadow. Claire hadn't heard from her since, and maybe she wouldn't. That was fine. Some chapters closed without fanfare. She pressed one soft note, then another. Her body remembered the melody her mind had long forgotten, a slow waltz her mother used to hum when the world felt fragile. The sound echoed up into the rafters. Behind her, the door creaked open. She knew the footsteps before he spoke. "You've been avoiding me," Logan said gently. "I've been thinking," Claire replied without turning. "And I've been tired." He crossed the room, pulling the music bench from the corner and setting it beside hers. They sat in silence for a moment, two people in the same space, but carrying different kinds of weight. "I wanted to say something," he said, voice low. "Before all this, before Camille left, before the press, before everything. But it felt like there was never a good time." Claire finally looked at him. "What is it?" Logan's eyes searched hers. "I've stayed on this project longer than any job I've ever had. Not because of the house. Not even because of the work. It's because of you." Her breath caught just slightly. "I watched you take back something that tried to erase you," he continued. "And you did it without bitterness, with your spine straight and your heart open. Claire, I think I'm falling for you." She looked down, blinking hard. She hadn't expected this moment, not now, not while so much still hung in the air. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said softly. "I'm not asking for an answer," he said quickly. "I'm just asking to stay." A long pause hung between them. Then she reached for his hand. Just held it. That was her answer for now. A knock interrupted the quiet moment. Ava peeked in, waving a slim manila envelope. "This came by courier," she said. "No return address." Claire stood smoothing her skirt, her heartbeat shifting from soft to sharp. Ava handed it over and stepped back, closing the door behind her. Claire opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neatly folded. On it, Jasper's handwriting. "Claire, you've made your point, loudly, publicly. Congratulations. But before you let this farce of a legacy consume you, I want you to remember something. None of this matters without reputation. You've told your story. I will tell mine. Be ready." She stared at the page, expression unreadable. Logan leaned in. "Is he threatening you?" She shook her head, more tired than afraid. "He's cornered. This is what cornered people do. They write letters when they've run out of leverage." Logan looked unconvinced. "You want to respond?" "No," she said, folding it neatly. "I want to wait." She tucked it into the drawer of the piano, then closed the lid. "I want him to see what legacy really looks like," she added. "Not in courtrooms, in light." Over the next few days, Waverly Bluff changed again. Journalists started arriving without invites. Small-time bloggers, Southern culture magazines, even a national lifestyle outlet wanted photos. Not of the wedding, of Claire. Somehow her quiet presence had turned into the story. A woman whose home had been taken, and who simply took it back. Martha arranged meetings. Judith managed the press. Ava handled the legal inquiries, and Logan, steady as ever, oversaw the grounds. But in the midst of it all, Claire made a decision. She walked into the conservatory on a warm Thursday morning, gathered her team, and spoke clearly. "I'm opening the house." Judith raised a brow. "To the public, not for tours," Claire said. "For one day, a showing, the real story of Waverly Bluff, before it becomes a backdrop to someone else's fairy tale." Martha nodded slowly. "You're giving the people their preview. I'm giving the truth its stage." They spent the next 72 hours preparing. Every room was styled as it once was, before renovations erased the fingerprints of its past. They brought out original sketches, photographs of the build, framed letters between Claire and her mother detailing early designs. The kitchen was filled with the smell of lemon pound cake and rosemary tea, just as it had been in the years when this house was alive with laughter. And Claire, through it all, stood at the center, not as the ex-wife, not as the forgotten woman, but as the architect of memory. On the morning of the showing, a soft rain fell, but it didn't keep people away. They came umbrellas in hand, wearing linen and pearls drawn by curiosity but lingering in reverence. Claire guided them herself, room by room, story by story. When she reached the conservatory, the one room left untouched by Camille's decorators, she paused beneath the dome of colored glass. "This was the room where I stopped pretending," she said quietly, her voice amplified, not by volume, but by weight. And that's where this journey began. At the edge of the group, a familiar figure stood. Jasper. He looked older, not in age, but in energy, the kind of wear that pride couldn't hide. Claire met his eyes, didn't flinch, then turned back to her guests and smiled. "We'll be opening a permanent exhibit next month, a gallery of the home's design history, a story in stages." A woman in the front row raised her hand. "And what will it be called?" Claire looked toward the window where the rain had slowed, and a single beam of light filtered through the colored glass. She smiled. Legacy. The morning of the wedding broke over Charleston like a held breath, hazy, warm quiet. Waverly Bluff stood washed in soft light, calm, and composed, as if it too understood what day it was. Claire sat at the edge of her bed, one foot tucked under her, holding a pale red envelope in her hand. The invitation. Elegant, impersonal, printed in gold leaf. Her name spelled out formally no personal note, no acknowledgement of irony. Just time, date, venue. Her eyes drifted to the bottom corner reception to follow in the grand hall of Waverly Bluff. She ran her fingers across the edge. The show was today. Downstairs, the house was already waking. Judith prepped the front parlor with quiet energy, smoothing linens and replacing florals. Martha sat in the reading room, calmly sipping black coffee as she reviewed the updated contracts for the exhibit. Ava had returned from a short trip and was coordinating media interest from a makeshift command center in the old study. And Logan? He was outside placing the final brick on the new garden path. She watched him from the window for a moment before heading down. He didn't see her coming until she was a few feet away. "You're up early," he said, brushing off his hands. Claire stepped onto the path. "Didn't sleep much." Logan nodded, wiping his brow with the edge of his sleeve. "Big day." She tilted her head. "For them, for you," he said. "He thinks this is the closing act. He has no idea it's the opening scene." Claire smiled faintly, but her stomach twisted. "What if it's too much?" she asked. "What if all of this just folds into his narrative that I'm bitter? That I'm jealous?" "You're not telling this story for him," Logan said, stepping closer. "You're telling it for every woman who was told she was too much, too soft, too sentimental to matter." His eyes searched hers. "And for the record, you're none of those things." Before she could answer, Ava appeared at the side door. "Claire," she said, "we have a situation." Claire's breath caught. "What kind, Camille?" Claire followed her inside, quickly past the staff, finishing setup, into the sitting room, where Camille stood, trembling veil in her hands. I'm sorry," she said as soon as Claire entered. "I didn't know where else to go." Her voice cracked. Claire closed the door behind her, the room thick with silence. "I thought you left town," she said carefully. "I did," Camille replied, swallowing hard. But this morning my sister sent me a photo of the gift Jasper had made for me, an oil painting of this house, with his name at the bottom, as the artist. Claire's expression didn't change, but her chest tightened. Camille stepped forward. He told his guests the house was his. He told them you'd agreed to step aside for the day, and that we were starting a new tradition here. As if she stopped breath-hitching. Claire waited. I couldn't go through with it, Camille whispered. The car's still waiting out front. But I can't do it. I can't walk into a life that starts with a lie. Claire's voice was low calm. Then don't. Camille's eyes filled again. What will people say? Claire walked over and gently took the veil from her hands. That you remembered yourself before it was too late. Camille broke, not with sobs, but with the soft collapse of someone who had held too much for too long. Claire didn't move to hug her, didn't offer platitudes. She simply stood there with her. Quiet, present. After a long minute, Camille looked up. Can I stay just for today? Claire nodded. Of course. Outside, the guests were already arriving, black cars rolling up the gravel drive heels, clicking on the stone path, champagne laughter floating through the open air. Most didn't know yet. Some would pretend not to. Jasper surely was still waiting at the venue, checking his watch, confident the show would begin, but it already had. Claire stepped out onto the balcony facing the east lawn, where a soft breeze played through the trees. Judith joined her calm as ever. Well, that's one way to cancel a wedding. Claire exhaled. He's going to spin this. Judith shrugged. Let him. The world's already watching, and he just got stood up in front of every guest he tried to impress. Claire turned back toward the house. Let's open the doors. Judith raised an eyebrow. To who? To the people who deserve to be here, Claire said. The community. The women who sent letters. The ones who asked if this was real. Judith smiled slowly. You want to give them the house? Claire nodded. For one afternoon. Logan appeared at the foot of the stairs, catching her eye. It's time, he said. Claire nodded once. She stepped down the staircase, past the portraits, past the memories, into the main hall. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. On her terms. With her voice. The house didn't belong to anyone's ego anymore. It belonged to the truth. The sky was overcast by noon, as if the clouds had come to bear witness. Claire stood beneath the front portico of Waverly Bluff, in a slate blue dress that skimmed her frame like it had been sewn for this exact hour. Her hair was pulled back, simple and soft, with just a single silver pin holding it in place. She looked like she'd walked out of an old painting, still graceful waiting. But inside, she was a storm. Camille sat in the drawing room, wrapped in a blanket Ava had handed her earlier. Her eyes were tired but dry now. She hadn't asked for updates, hadn't checked her phone. She just sat quietly, like a woman relearning stillness. Logan joined Claire at the doorway, slipping a hand into his jacket pocket. There's press outside, he said. Real ones, not just bloggers. You want to speak? Claire turned to him. No. I want them to see what happens when women stop apologizing for being the story. He smiled, his voice low. You already are. A silver sedan pulled into the driveway, slow, deliberate. Out stepped Jasper, not in a tuxedo, not even in a blazer, just a wrinkled dress shirt and expensive shoes that suddenly looked out of place on gravel. He didn't approach immediately. He stood at the edge of the garden path, adjusting his cuff like it mattered, like anything still did. Claire walked toward him slowly, her steps steady, unhurried. When they finally stood face to face, it was the first time in months. You canceled, he said quietly, eyes flicking to the crowd gathered beyond the fence line. No, she said. Camille did. He scoffed softly. "You think this wins you something I'm not here to win, Jasper," she said, voice even. "I'm here to close." Jasper's jaw tightened. "You always had a way of turning things. You think anyone believes you didn't plan this?" Claire didn't blink. "I didn't need to. You built it yourself. Brick by brick." He stepped closer. "You want to play the victim, fine. But don't think I'm going to sit back while you rewrite the narrative. That house is mine." Claire interrupted, quiet but clear. Legally, morally, architecturally. His eyes narrowed. And now she continued, "It's not even about you anymore." He laughed, but it landed hollow. She looked past him toward the street where neighbors and strangers had started to gather. Some curious, some recording, most just watching. "You built your life on image," she said. "I built mine on work. One of those things survives scrutiny." His lips parted as if to argue, but nothing came out. She stepped back. Not in retreat, just to create space. Breathing room. "You should go, Jasper," she said softly, "and let you take the victory lap." Claire tilted her head. "There's no victory in walking through wreckage, just clarity." He hesitated for a long moment, then turned and walked to his car. He didn't slam the door. He didn't peel away. He just drove off slowly, like a man unraveling by inches. Logan appeared beside her. "You didn't flinch." "I wanted to," Claire said, "but I couldn't give him the satisfaction of still having that kind of power." They stood in silence for a moment. Then she turned to him. "Do you think people change?" Logan considered the question carefully. "I think people reveal. Under pressure, under loss. They stop pretending." She nodded, something inside her softening. Judith appeared at the door. The last of the guests just left. "We're clear." Claire nodded once, then looked at Logan. "Walk with me." They moved through the garden, now quiet again, the petals of the camellias littering the brick path, like confetti from a celebration no one had named. "I spent so long thinking that this house was the story," Claire said, watching her steps. "That saving it would save me." "But it's not the house, is it?" "No," Logan said. "It's what you did with the wreckage." They reached the back of the property where the marshland shimmered faintly in the distance. Claire stopped. "I want to open it next month," she said. "Officially, the gallery, the storytelling space. I want it to be free. I want it to be for women who never got the last word." Logan looked at her. "That's a legacy." She turned to him. "I think I'm finally ready," she said, breath catching slightly, for what he asked gently. Claire held his gaze. To stop surviving. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt the quiet swell of something that wasn't pain or pressure or performance. She felt peace. The sun rose slow and honey-colored over Charleston. The morning Waverly Bluff opened its gates to the public. The air was warm, touched with the scent of magnolia and old wood polish. Claire stood in the entry hall, staring at the clock mounted over the staircase. It was nearly 10. The invitations had gone out quietly. No press release, no media circus. Just word-of-mouth handwritten cards and a few well-placed calls. The first exhibit of the Marigold House Gallery would open today. Not to collectors, not to buyers. To women. Women who had written letters. Women who had walked away from something. Women who knew how it felt to rebuild with bare hands and a quiet kind of fury. Claire's palms were damp. She wiped them on her skirt and breathed deep. Ready Ava peeked in from the side parlor holding a clipboard, always the anchor. Claire nodded once. As I'll ever be. The doors opened. The guests didn't come in droves. They came in quiet waves. Women of all ages, mostly older, many alone, a few with daughters. Some wore vintage pearls. Others came in sneakers and soft cardigans. Each carried something invisible: grief, hope, history. Claire greeted every one of them personally. "Welcome," she'd say with a hand on their arm or a warm smile. "Come in. Take your time." The house, now transformed, hummed with life. The gallery wove through each room sketches of the original design photographs of the construction notes between Claire and Martha scrawled in the margins of floor plans. But it wasn't just a tour of architecture. It was a tour of becoming. In the dining room, a wall had been transformed into a collage of anonymous letters, stories submitted by women from around the country. Heartbreaks, injustices, triumphs. One woman paused there, reading a note written in shaky cursive. "I spent 28 years as a wife and 18 months learning how to be a person again." Her hand lifted to her mouth, then dropped. Claire watched from across the room. That was the moment she'd been waiting for. Not applause, not recognition. Resonance. She turned to find Logan standing behind her, hands in his pockets. "You did it," he said softly. "I didn't do it alone." He smiled. "That's the beauty of it." They walked together through the west wing where sunlight filtered through the lace-curtained windows and dust hung suspended like glitter. Claire paused at a display near the conservatory. It held only one thing: the red wedding invitation, framed in glass. Underneath it, a single plaque. "This was the moment I decided to come back to life." Logan read it, then looked at her. "That line's going to stick with people." Claire looked at the glass. "It stuck with me." As they continued walking, Logan's shoulder brushed hers gently. Neither of them moved away. "Have you thought about what comes next?" he asked. She glanced at him, surprised. "Next?" He nodded. "The gallery's open. Jasper's out of the picture. Camille's finding her own way. You've reclaimed the house." "What now?" Claire exhaled slowly. "I don't know," she admitted. "I think I've lived so long just trying to hold the walls up. I never pictured what it'd be like to walk through them again." They stopped near the terrace where a few guests were sipping tea and speaking in low, reverent tones. "I think you should keep going," Logan said, voice warm. "Keep telling the truth, not just yours, others. Make this place more than a monument." Claire tilted her head. "You want to help? I already am," he said with a grin. "But if you're asking if I want to stay, yes. In whatever way you'll let me." Her chest fluttered at the simplicity of it. The steadiness. "I'd like that," she said. He reached for her hand. Just held it. Outside, the breeze picked up, rustling the trees. A group of women stood near the garden path, one wiping her eyes, another reaching for her hand. That same chain reaction Claire had seen again and again since this morning began. One woman remembering, another one recognizing. Each visitor left different. Not healed, necessarily, but seen. As the last guest exited, hours later, Claire walked back to the conservatory and sat beneath the stained glass dome. The light poured in, golden and warm, painting her lap in soft reds and blues. Martha joined her a few minutes later, moving slower these days, but still sharp. "You did good, baby," she said, lowering herself into the chair beside her. "Your grandmother would have clapped." Claire laughed, surprised by the tears that sprang up behind her eyes. "I thought it would feel more finished." "It never finishes," Martha said gently. "It just changes shape." They sat in silence, the old wood creaking around them, the house settling once again into its new life. And somewhere in that silence, Claire realized something she hadn't dared believe in years. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was free. The scent of honeysuckle drifted through the garden as the sun began to set, casting soft gold across the white columns of Waverly Bluff. Claire stood on the back terrace, arms folded, watching as the last rays touched the ivy that curled up the trellises like time trying to climb its way back in. The day had been quiet, peaceful even. But inside her something had begun to stir, something unspoken, unfinished. She heard the screen door creak open behind her. "Logan, I figured I'd find you here," he said, his voice gentle. Claire didn't turn right away. Funny how this place used to feel too big. Now I find corners of it I never want to leave. He stepped beside her, his presence grounding. "You've filled it with meaning, that's why." She looked up at him. "I'm not sure I knew what meaning was until I lost everything that wasn't real." He didn't answer right away, letting the moment stretch. Then he said, "You got a letter." Claire blinked. From who? Logan pulled it from his pocket. The envelope was cream thick and familiar, her name written in bold black ink. She took it slowly, her fingers brushing his. Opening it, she scanned the words. Her breath caught halfway through. "It's from Jasper's attorney," she said, eyes narrowing. "He's contesting the terms, wants to meet." "Here," she shook her head. "Neutral ground. Downtown Charleston. A coffee shop." Logan leaned against the rail, arms crossed. "You don't have to go." "I know," she said, folding the letter carefully. "But I want to." He looked at her. "I need to see him one last time," she added. "Not for closure, for clarity." Claire tucked the envelope into her pocket and exhaled. "I want him to see what I became. Not in anger, not in show. Just truth." Logan nodded. "Then I'll drive you." She smiled. "You always know when to show up. That's what you do for people you care about." The air shifted between them, softer now, less guarded. Claire looked at him and saw not just safety but possibility. A man who never tried to save her, only stood steady while she saved herself. "Come with me," she said quietly. "To the meeting." He studied her. "Are you sure?" "Yes. Not because I need backup," she said, voice firm. "Because I want you there when I turn the page." He nodded once. "Then I'll be there." The next afternoon, the cafe buzzed with quiet conversation and the low hiss of steaming milk. Claire arrived early, choosing a seat near the window. Logan sat beside her, not saying much, just offering a calm presence, a quiet kind of solidarity. Jasper entered exactly on time, wearing a navy suit that didn't quite hide the fray at the seams. His tie was slightly crooked. He hesitated at the door when he saw Logan, but approached without comment. "Claire," he said, nodding. "Jasper." He glanced at Logan. "This is Logan. He's here as my support," she said simply. "And witness." Jasper's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. He slid a folder across the table. "I want the original plans to the bluff, and the branding rights. I built a name off that house." Claire blinked slowly. "You built an illusion. I invested in it." "No," she said, folding her hands calmly. "You exploited it. That house was my work, my family's legacy. You walked away, Jasper. You gave up the right to shape its story." Jasper leaned back, eyes flashing. "I made you who you are." "No," Claire said, and this time her voice didn't waver. "You made me question who I was. I did the rest on my own." He opened his mouth to respond, but Claire held up a hand. "This meeting is not about negotiation," she said. "It's about acknowledgement. I'm not giving you anything." Jasper's face paled. "You were invited to that wedding to see what I looked like unbroken," she continued. "But you missed it. So I'm giving you this moment now, to witness what happens when the story you tried to control walks away." She stood. Logan stood with her. Jasper stayed seated, the folder, untouched, the weight of silence pressing down. Claire turned back once before leaving. Her voice was quiet, steady. If you've ever wondered whether you lost the best thing that ever happened to you, you did. And with that, she walked out into the Charleston afternoon, the sun sharp and clear like the truth itself. It was nearly dusk when Claire walked through the empty halls of Waverly Bluff barefoot, holding a cup of mint tea that had long gone cold. The gallery lights had been dimmed for the evening. The scent of fresh paint still lingered faintly in the West Wing where new installations were being prepared for next month's exhibit, this one featuring stories of women who had started over after 40. Real women. Women who had walked through fire and come out carrying water for the next. She paused in front of the framed red envelope hanging in the conservatory, the one she'd once thought was a symbol of betrayal. Now it felt like the spark that had reignited her entire soul. Behind her, the floor creaked gently. "Thought I'd find you here," Logan said, voice low, warm. She turned and smiled. "You always do." He crossed the room slowly, his steps careful, as if not to disturb the quiet reverence the space held. He stopped beside her and looked at the envelope for a long time. "You still thinking about that meeting?" he asked softly. Claire shook her head. "No. I said what needed to be said. There's nothing left in that story for me." "Then what now?" She exhaled slowly, looking out the tall glass windows toward the garden where fireflies had started blinking against the backdrop of twilight. "Now I build. But not from anger, not from pain, from intention." Logan nodded thoughtfully, then glanced at her. "Can I ask you something?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "Did you ever miss him after it all?" There was a long pause. Claire looked back at the red envelope. "I missed who I thought he was, not who he really was, and I missed the version of me who needed his approval." She turned fully to face Logan, her voice soft but strong. "But I don't miss her anymore either. She was surviving. I'm living." Logan smiled, proud, quiet. They stepped out onto the back terrace, where Martha sat on a wicker chair with a glass of iced tea and her knitting. She looked up as they approached. Well, she drawled, squinting into the fading light. "Y'all look like the end of a good book," Claire laughed. "Maybe we are." Martha smiled knowingly. "Every end is just a beginning dressed in Sunday shoes." They sat beside her, the three of them watching as the garden lights flicked on one by one, like stars remembering their purpose. After a while, Martha stood stretched and nodded toward Claire. "I left something for you in the study. Go look before I change my mind." Claire stood and kissed her mother's cheek. "What is it you'll see?" Martha replied, already walking inside with the slow ease of a woman who'd fought enough battles to deserve her rest. Claire looked at Logan. He tilted his head toward the house. "Go, I'll wait here." She walked through the house again, slower this time, taking in every detail. The creaks in the floorboards, the way the walls breathed with memory now instead of tension. How the echo of her footsteps sounded less like a woman alone and more like someone returning. In the study, she found a box on the desk. Inside, her grandmother's brooch, a letter in Martha's handwriting. "Claire, you've made this house sing again. But don't forget your voice is what gave it melody. It's time to think bigger. The gallery is just the first chapter. Let your story be the reason someone else starts theirs. I'm proud of you. Not for surviving. For becoming." Mom Claire pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes, letting the tears come. Not the kind that fell from sorrow. The kind that made space. That cleared the view. Later that night, she stood outside the gates of Waverly Bluff, holding Logan's hand. A new sign had been installed. The Marigold House. A sanctuary for women's stories below it, a smaller plaque founded by Claire Bellamy, born again at 39, reborn for good at 42. Claire looked up at the stars, then down at the path ahead. You ready? Logan asked. She nodded, her voice catching just slightly. I am. They walked down the gravel path together, hand in hand, under the moonlight, the wind whispering through the trees like a hymn. Behind them the house stood tall, lit from within, filled with voices, and ahead of them a future waiting to be written, not as a sequel to pain, but as the first page of something entirely new.